I'm just trying to share with you some perspectives on issues of concern both to Jewish parliamentarians and to Israeli members of the Knesset. And as these issues also find expression in our domestic parliaments and indeed in the international parliamentary and global arena. Let me begin first with Iran. The Prime Minister this morning mentioned that this is a clear and present danger. Indeed, it's a clear and present danger to international peace and security, to Middle East and regional stability, and increasingly and alarmingly so to the Iranian people themselves in massive domestic repression. There are four basic threats from Iran. I'm only going to name them. You all know them. The nuclear, state-sanctioned incitement to genocide, the terrorist, and, as I said, massive domestic repression. Now, parliaments around the world, through their governments, have enacted sanctions, but belatedly, I would say, though necessarily, but targeting largely the nuclear threat, not the other three threats. I want to mention only one of them in particular because it has a special resonance for us, and that is the danger of state-sanctioned incitement to genocide. Simply put, and with this I close, Iran has already committed the crime of incitement to genocide prohibited by the Genocide Convention. State parties to the Genocide Convention, which include the governments and parliaments of all of us assembled around this table, have an obligation, it's not a policy option, an obligation to combat this state-sanctioned incitement to genocide, and there are legal remedies to do that. We have not undertaken any of the legal remedies. Just one of them, for example, any state party to the Genocide Convention, United States, Canada, France, etc., can initiate tomorrow an interstate complaint against Iran, which is a state party also to the Genocide Convention, for its violations before the International Court of Justice. I've listed one of 8 legal remedies that I've otherwise written about, just to make this point that this is our responsibility. It's not a policy option. 2, global anti-Semitism. Basic thesis is that we are witnessing and have been witnessing for some time a new, escalating, globalized, virulent, and even lethal anti-Semitism that overlaps with traditional anti-Semitism but is distinguishable from it, that first found international juridical expression in the United Nations Zionism is Racism resolution, but has gone dramatically beyond it. A new anti-Semitism for which one almost needs a new vocabulary to define it. This led to the founding of the Inter-Parliamentary Coalition to combat anti-Semitism. Fiamma Nierenstein, myself, are members of its steering committee. It held its inaugural, its founding conference in London, February 2009. I mentioned this because at that conference we adopted the London Declaration to Combat Anti-Semitism. That declaration will be distributed to you if it has not yet been done already. A second conference held in Ottawa, November 2010, that conference brought together some 140 parliamentarians from 50 countries, mostly non-Jewish, who adopted the Ottawa Protocol to combat anti-Semitism. Both the declaration and the protocol can serve as international templates, examples of what parliaments can do in their respective countries to combat anti-Semitism. Some of the recommendations are, and with this I close this second point, that each parliament establish a national parliamentary coalition to combat anti-Semitism. United Kingdom did this. Canada has done this. Second, that it undertake a parliamentary inquiry to combat anti-Semitism. United Kingdom did it, Canada did it, and Italy did it. I was going to get to Italy. Yeah, no. And the third thing is that the inquiries publish a report emanating from their inquiries, which the government can then respond to. The United Kingdom has done all these three things. Italy and Canada have done the other two, but awaiting the reports and the government action, though in Italy, thanks to Fiamma, that has already begun. Third point, third concern, delegitimization. That has become a kind of buzzword. Wherever you go, you hear delegitimization. It's become almost a conference industry. I just want to say on this point briefly, delegitimization is not a new phenomenon. It began with the establishment of Israel in 1948 when Israel was referred to as an original sin. It continued in the run-up to the Six-Day War when Israel was referred to as a congenital act of aggression. And then it continued with the Zionism as racism resolution, which the late Senator Daniel Moynihan of the United States succinctly summed up by saying it gave the abomination of anti-Semitism the appearance of international legal sanction. What makes what is happening today different from delegitimization, which has always been with us, is what might be called the laundering or the masking of delegitimization under all things that we care about, such as the rule of law, etc. The attempt being to portray Israel as the enemy of all that is good and the repository of all that is evil. In the booklet that you have, I wrote partly about this. I'll just sum up one line again, because I don't want to take your time. What are each of the basic themes under which delegitimization is being laundered? One, under the protective cover of the United Nations, where Israel is singled out for differential and discriminatory treatment. Two, under international law, international human rights, humanitarian and criminal law, where here too Israel is singled out for selective indictment and prosecution, otherwise known as lawfare. Three, under human rights, where Israel here too is singled out as the mega human rights violator. In a world in which human rights has emerged as the new secular religion of our time, the attempt is to portray Israel as the human rights violator of our time, a kind of new antichrist of our time. And finally, laundering it under the struggle against racism. And the worst thing you can do today, and as any other times, to call somebody a racist. Today what is being done is to ascribe to Israel the two twin evils of the 20th century, apartheid and Nazism. And since apartheid is defined as a crime against humanity under international law, the principle here is Israel as an apartheid state under international law has no right to be, and even worse, because it's a Nazi state, we have an obligation even to dismantle it. Which leads me to the last point that I want to mention. We are on the road now to a possible attempt at a United Nations unilateral declaration of a Palestinian state. What is the alternative and can preempt it is direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian people. And Palestinian Authority as their representative. I want to close by just saying that recently in France, the G8, the countries of the G8, in their final communique, called for direct negotiations based on the Obama principles. Frankly, very few people have read what these Obama principles are. But if you read them, and in the article that is in the booklet that you have, I summarize them, these 8 principles actually align with the 8 principles enunciated by Prime Minister Netanyahu himself. So I think as parliamentarians, we could both respond to and in fact support this initiative by calling for direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians based on these 8 principles, which include recognition of Israel as a Jewish state, which include no negotiations with the Palestinians as long as Hamas is a partner and is committed to Israel's destruction, which include a demilitarized state, etc. You know, the things that Israel has enunciated. But the call should come for a return to negotiations based on the G8 communique, which endorses the Obama principles. Then the Palestinian Authority and Abbas can't say, oh, we're against the Netanyahu principles. It won't be the Netanyahu principles, it'll be the principles of the international community, as stated in the G8 communique, as articulated by President Obama, and then that will hold the Palestinians to account. Are you prepared in fact, among other things, to recognize Israel as a Jewish state, which the G8 communique calls for, which Obama calls for, not just what Netanyahu calls for. So with this I close. Those are the 4 issues that I think are issues of major concern to all our parliaments, be they Jewish parliamentarians in the diaspora or the Israeli, Iran, global anti-Semitism, delegitimization, the peace process. Thank you.